So Melanie, thank you so much for being here, first of all. Okay, so we're going to talk about puppy mills. This is a subject that is very emotional and has a lot behind the scenes that goes on. So Melanie's the expert on this, and that's why I've asked her to come speak about this. Melanie, from the very beginning, tell me what a puppy mill is.
At the Humane Society of the United States, we define a puppy mill as an inhumane breeding facility.
Okay, because there is a difference between a responsible breeder who would breed,
Right.
you know, maybe one litter at a time,
Right.
and then these people are breeding thousands of litters at a time.
Right. There is a huge difference between what we call responsible breeders and breeders who breed simply for profit. Responsible breeders really care about where their puppies are going, so they take great pains and efforts to screen the people who are purchasing their puppies. A puppy mill is, think something like a puppy factory, where dogs are just bred continuously to produce puppies just to be sold in the pet trade.
Now, is there one breed in particular that the puppy mills like to stick with?
You know, we have seen, unfortunately, we have seen every breed of dog, almost every breed of dog in puppy mills. Usually what we see more often than not, however, are some of those smaller breeds, the breeds that are about 20 pounds and under, the little, what they like to call designer breed dogs.
Toys.
Yes, the little teacup breeds, or the breeds that they cross with poodles and then bill them as hypoallergenic, even though there's no such thing as a hypoallergenic dog.
Well, that's really important to point out, because I know people with these dogs
Right.
that are like, oh, they don't shed and they don't have any allergens,
And then they find out later they do, because
they're
truth be
dogs.
told, every dog sheds. There is no such thing as a hypoallergenic dog.
Right. Okay. Good to know. I did not know that. Okay. So these people are basically, they're like, oh, I want to make some money. So this is this is how I'm going to make my money. I'm going to get a bunch of dogs. I'm going to throw them into a cage. I'm going to breed them, and they're going to have puppies, and then I'm going to sell these puppies. Yeah. I mean, I saw that most of the pet stores are selling for about an average of about $1,000 a puppy, and
Sure.
I think to myself, why would somebody pay $1,000 for a puppy when they can go to a shelter, a Humane Society shelter, and get a perfectly good dog, probably the same breed.
Right. It really is unfortunate, but the truth of the matter is we live in a consumer-driven society. People want what they want when they want it. We've seen websites of puppy mill breeders where they literally have drop-down menus where you can pick the sex of your dog, the color of your dog, the type of characteristics, curly hair, wavy hair. It's like custom made to order puppies, and that's not the way dogs are supposed to be raised.
Well, and I'm fascinated because I'm like completely anti-computer. I don't know it. I still call it the machine. Okay, that's how like backwards I am.
I think a lot of us do.
Okay, good. But the thing about it is, I saw that you can buy dogs on the internet.
Oh.
Explain that to me, because what do? You order it and then they send it to you in a box? Like, how does this happen?
The internet sales of puppies is one of our biggest concerns right now, because it is the fastest growing way for puppy millers to do business, because it is entirely unregulated right now at the federal level. So it's really easy for breeders to get away with treating dogs incredibly inhumanely, and yes, just shipping them over the country, all over the country. And the problem is, you can hide behind so many beautiful pictures of countrysides that you say that the dogs get to play in every day, when the truth of the matter is they're in cages where they can barely move, and they only get to look at that countryside from the outside, inside of their cages. What we do hear from consumers, and from what we know from our investigations of internet sellers, is that frequently the way it works is the consumer will purchase the dog either over the phone through an online vendor, and give the person their credit card number over the phone, or directly on the internet. And yes, they are frequently told by the internet seller, oh, we have a location in that area. Well, most of us think, oh, you have a breeder or a pet store or some facility where I'm going to pick up the dog, and not until after the sale has gone through are they told, you pick it up at JFK Airport, this is the flight they come in on, you can get your dog at baggage claim at XX time, and it's not until after the consumer has made that purchase. Frequently, as you can imagine, shipping a puppy in the cargo area of a plane across the country even if the puppy is well when they're shipped, may not be well when they land on the ground.
Right.
So we have heard and continue to hear from consumers on a daily basis that have purchased sick puppies over the internet that run up crazy vet bills that they're not expecting and ultimately are unable to save the puppy. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and it can absolutely be avoided if consumers would just not purchase dogs from pet stores, online, or from breeders at flea markets.
Right, yeah, and I definitely want to talk about the whole flea market thing, because I actually have a dog that was a rescue who was in South Carolina. Someone purchased her from the flea market to save her, then gave her to a local rescue, and then I adopted her. But I understand that these dogs they're stolen from people's yards. They are, they come from a number of different places. They can be bred, but they're sort of like this random place of origin. And then they sell them at these swap meet kind of things.
That's right. And it is flea markets and swap meets and sales in parking lots are frequently the way puppy millers will do business in the southern regions of our country.
Okay.
It's much more popular than the north or the west.
Okay.
That's kind of your pet store, internet selling area. But the southern regions of our country are where most puppy mill dogs are sold. And it is a free-for-all. It's not regulated. The flea markets don't care who comes and sells there as long as they're making a profit. So you have breeders from outside the state, inside the state, coming in and selling these dogs to anyone who shows up with cash in hand at these flea markets. They're coming, make no mistake about it, from puppy mills.
Okay.
Responsible breeders simply just do not sell dogs to people that they haven't screened, that they haven't met in person, and they will make their customers sign contracts that say things like, if you ever decide you don't want the dog, you return it to me. At 1 year old, if you're not going to be showing the dog, you have to provide me with a spay or neuter certificate.
Yeah,
These are the precautions that have to be taken. And that is the difference between buying from a puppy mill operator or a responsible breeder. We're not against buying from a responsible breeder. We do ask that people consider adopting from a shelter or rescue because we have about 3 to 4 million adoptable dogs in this country that need homes, that have come from pet stores and were given up by people who just simply bought them on a whim and then decided they couldn't keep them. So it's a very, very tough issue. It's a very emotional issue because we're talking about man's best friend. And at the end of the day, it is up to consumers to choose to change the way dogs are produced in our country by not buying dogs in pet stores, not buying dogs online or at flea markets or from someone they've never met.
I don't think people really understand how much power they have. Like, the normal consumer doesn't know, hey, I can make a choice here. I can actually guide an industry. Because I always say, if you don't buy it, they can't supply it.
Right.
So, if you don't buy puppy mill dogs, they will go out of business, and that's just the law of economics.
Right. There's no question about it. This is an entirely consumer-driven issue. If puppy mill operators have no one to sell their dogs to, they will go out of business. They will cease to exist. But there will still be plenty of dogs in this country for people to have as pets, to have that companionship, because there are still going to be stray dogs that are breeding in our communities. There are always going to be responsible breeders who are breeding dogs appropriately, that are attentive to the health and welfare of the dogs. So there are always going to be dogs available for people in this country. They do not have to get them from the places that puppy mill operators are selling their dogs to.
Now, can we talk a little bit about the conditions of the puppy mills?
Sure.
I understand that according to what law there is, the dog is only required 6 inches above its head and on either side of its body in moving room.
Right. That's the Federal Animal Welfare Act.
Okay.
That's what's required currently under the Federal Animal Welfare Act. Certain states have changed that and required more space, for example, for the dogs. It's a very archaic law.
Right.
It needs to change.
So how do we change it?
One thing that is in progress right now is the USDA has made a commitment to put out a rule that would require that anyone who sells dogs to the public, if they have more than 3 breeding female dogs,
Okay.
they have to have a federal license and be regulated.
Okay.
Later, we are going to have to speak to federal authorities about changing those standards.
Mm-hmm.
The Animal Welfare Act standards are merely survivable standards.
Right.
It is absolutely not the conditions any of us would
Any creature
imagine.
should live in.
Absolutely.
Right.
We would never keep our dogs in that condition. So the dogs that are breeding shouldn't be in that condition either.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are conservatively about 10,000 puppy mills in this country.
Producing.
About 4 to 5 million dogs a year, which is conveniently about the number of dogs being euthanized in shelters every year.
Right, exactly. So if we took them out of the equation,
Right.
we would have the dogs in the shelters that could find homes and
That's
not be
right.
pushed out by these puppy mills. Because one of the unfortunate parts of this cycle is that you have the puppy mill producing the dog,
Right.
then it goes out, somebody doesn't want it, can't take care of it, so brings it to the shelter.
That's
and
right.
so these poor dogs start in the puppy mill and end up in the shelter anyway,
That's right.
and that's just completely unnecessary.
And lest we forget, most shelters are funded by taxpayers. So we're paying for the euthanasia of all of these healthy adoptable animals
Right.
that we don't have to be paying for. I can guarantee that most people in this country would argue that there are better uses for that money.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that most people would agree too that this practice is completely unacceptable and must stop.
Right. What we do know from all of the consumer research we've done in our campaign is that when consumers become aware of the realities of puppy mills, what goes on in puppy mills, they are appalled by it, they don't want to support it. But unfortunately, the industry has become very savvy about duping consumers into believing that their dogs are all coming from these beautiful home environments when in fact they're coming from puppy mills.
So tell me about how some of the ways that they try to dupe the consumer.
Well, for example, this past weekend, I was in a number of pet stores for an investigation that we're currently working on and asked the pet store owners a number of questions about the dogs. Where do you get the dogs from? What kind of places are they like? You know, what do you think of the breeder? And you are always told that they are wonderful, home-raised, responsible, USDA licensed breeders. You know, they're great. I know them personally. Just complete
Baloney.
nonsense. Because the fact of the matter is, they don't know the breeders. A pet store in, say, you know, New York is not flying out to Missouri
Right.
to check out the breeder operation
Right.
that they're buying dogs from. No, they're putting in an order, and that order is delivered to them.
Right, right. By a plane that they pick up at JFK.
A plane, it's delivered by truck. I mean,
It's
it's
crazy.
just a horrible process. The puppy pipeline, which is what we call it, from start to finish, is incredibly inhumane.
Well, speaking of incredibly humane, can you tell me a little bit about debarking?
You know, debarking is one of those things that we do not agree with. It is something that is frequently used by puppy mill operators to silence the dogs on their properties. And it's not done in a way that is acceptable to any veterinarian.
Well, I understand they take a pipe and they shove it down its throat and crush its voice box
Correct.
with no anesthesia.
Correct.
And also, not to mention no antibiotic to help it when they've cut the
Right.
tissue and it's getting infected, there's no antibiotic. And so this animal, even after it happens with the incredible pain, then has to live with the incredible pain of the healing process.
Right. It's an incredibly inhumane medical procedure. If it's done appropriately by a veterinarian, it can be okay.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, more often than not, we find that debarking is a practice that is common to puppy mill operators.
Well, and it's done so that the dogs won't draw attention to the fact
Right.
that these people have a puppy mill going on.
Right, because even if you live out in the country away from a lot of people, if you have 300 dogs barking on your property,
Sure.
someone driving by is going to hear that.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're trying to prevent. I mean, the medical, one of the things that we like to say in our campaign is that puppy mill operators, to save money, like to play doctor.
Right, right.
They like to practice medicine without a medical license. Debarking is one of those procedures that they like to do. Another one that we see frequently are puppy mill operators performing their own C-sections without anesthesia and whatnot.
Oh my God.
It's hard to even imagine,
Right.
but these are things that they do, and they do it so that they can increase their profits as much as possible.
Right. Keep it quiet. Keep them coming.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Even if they have to cut them out themselves.
That's right.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, for a puppy mill operator, if we're talking about a puppy mill operator doing their own C-section, it is worth more to them financially to cut open that mother dog and take the puppies out and just leave the mother dog to bleed to
die.
death.
Sure.
Because the puppies are what's financial, what's making the money.
Well, I understand that too, that a lot of the dogs, once they can't breed anymore, or maybe they get sick, or even have fleas, for instance, the owner will just take them and shoot them because it's less expensive and easier to just shoot them in the backyard than to pay for medical attention to help with their fleas, which is something that is so simple.
Absolutely, and that's something that's very common. You know, what we normally tell people when we're asked that question, what happens to the dogs after they can't breed them anymore, is we say that they're discarded.
Okay, which is a gentle term for thrown in the trash, basically.
Right. They're either left on the side of the road, dropped off at a shelter, they're killed in inhumane manners. I mean, gunshots, unfortunately, that's on the scale
That's
one of the more
humane
ways that a dog can be killed. It's certainly not something we advocate.
Of course.
It's not an appropriate method of euthanasia, but it's quick.
Well, exactly. The animal doesn't suffer like it would if it was cut open and left to bleed.
Right. One of the frequent ways, unfortunately, that we see puppy millers putting to death puppies that aren't perfect, that they're not going to be able to sell for as much money as that they had hoped, is drowning. And that's an incredibly difficult way to die.
Yeah, the level of suffering is very high.
Right.
Yeah.
When it comes to animals in this country, we are responsible for so much animal suffering. For everything from puppy mill dogs to birds to exotic animals to the animals that we consume. We expose these animals to a huge amount of unnecessary suffering. And unfortunately, all of the industries that are involved in this suffering do everything they can to hide that reality from consumers.
Exactly, and that's exactly what my mission is. And I don't want to be like a point your fingers kind of person. I just want to say, hey, listen, these are the facts. This is what's going on in our country. I want to help you open your eyes to this so that when you can make a decision, I can either support this or I cannot support this.
Right.
And I think most people, when they hear this, say, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with this. How do I stop this?
Right.
So how do we stop this? How?
The way to stop it is by not doing anything that encourages
The industry.
the industry. So when we're talking about puppies, it means don't buy puppy mill dogs. Puppy mill dogs are sold in pet stores, no matter what the pet store owner tells you. Puppy mill dogs are sold in pet stores, over the internet, and at flea markets, or in parking lots or side of the road. Exactly.
Now, is there something we can do on a legislative level, like, maybe write to a congressman, or is there a department in particular that we can say, let's, send our feelings, let's send our ideas to these people? Who would that be?
In this country, the USDA is responsible for enforcement of the Animal Welfare Act.
Okay.
That's the archaic act that does, at this time, protect puppy mill dogs to some degree.
Okay.
With that said, we do need better laws in this country. So the best thing that people can do is to write to their federal lawmakers and express their concern for this issue and let federal lawmakers know that they care about this issue and want them to do something substantial about it. It doesn't mean you can't write to your state lawmakers, because quite frankly, state lawmakers are likely to do something faster on this issue than they can at the federal level. Exactly.
Right.
Or, you know what, we work at the state, federal, and local levels of government.
Okay.
You can go to your town council member and say, I want to ban the sale of dogs in pet stores in this county.
So
Let's
that
do it.
sounds like something that is so simple.
It is very simple, and there is a trend across the country
Good.
banning the sale of dogs in pet stores because they are coming from puppy mills. In fact, the city of LA
Okay.
in California, one of the biggest cities in this country, has banned the sale of dogs in pet stores. If LA can do it, some of these smaller localities throughout the country can do it too.
Well, so goes California, goes the country, right? That's
Absolutely.
What they say. So
Absolutely.
That's wonderful news. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything that like maybe you think we didn't touch on that people should really know?
You know, one thing that I do really want people to understand is that when a breeder or a pet store owner or someone selling a dog at a flea market tells you we are USDA certified, AKC registered, it does not mean anything.
Right.
That is a piece of paper. As much as the AKC likes to say we inspect, we care about dogs, in just the past about 5 years, they've opposed more than 90 laws that we've tried to pass at the state and local level to increase the standards of care for dogs in facilities across the country. Now, you would think the AKC would be supportive of that. After all, they term themselves the dog's champion.
And that's the American Kennel Club, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But they do anything but. And the reason is because they profit financially for each dog that is registered with the AKC. And they allow puppy mill produced dogs to register with the AKC.
Okay.
So that's their constituency now. More than 80% of the registrations with the AKC come from puppy mill bred dogs. That's why they fight us on every piece of legislation that we try and pass to make conditions better for dogs in these commercial facilities.
I didn't know that, and I know that most of my friends don't know that, and so I'm so glad that you shared that with me. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's incredibly important. And, you know, they oppose not just puppy mill specific laws, but one of the things that I think shocked me the most was a law about 2 years ago in Tennessee that was proposed by a local county that would criminalize keeping dogs in cars on hot days. We all know you don't do that because the chances of the dog dying are so high.
Yeah, especially in Tennessee where it's hot.
Very hot.
Yeah.
The AKC opposed that law.
I know, we're both stunned. It's like, what do you say? What do you
They
say?
oppose that law.
Mm-hmm.
It's
What was their reasoning?
Well, their reasoning is because sometimes show dog breeders keep their dogs in cars. Well, no show dog breeder is going to keep their dog in a car for any extended period of time where the dog is going to be suffering.
Right.
It is just silly.
Well, because those dogs are their lives.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So that is what I mean when I say that the AKC consistently takes positions against animal welfare when that is exactly what they claim to be pushing for.
Right, right. Well, and that brings up kind of a question in the sense that, like, if a puppy mill owner wants to make profit from these dogs, then why doesn't he take better care of them? I guess it doesn't matter how they're delivered, correct? Just so they are delivered.
Right. I mean, I can't tell you how many consumers call us on a daily basis that just picked up their puppy mill dog that they didn't know was a puppy mill dog, of course, from the airport that they bought on the internet, and the dog is just covered in dirt and feces and has parvo.
Right.
It's just a matter
So-
of making the sale.
Okay, so yeah, they don't care about the conditions. Because, I mean, you would think,
No.
well, like a good breeder does. You know, they want their dogs
Right.
to be healthy so that people will come back and buy again and, you know, whatever.
And
So,
absolutely.
economically, it doesn't make sense to torture these animals and have them in bad condition because it's bad for business. So why wouldn't they want to take better care of them?
Well, unfortunately, the puppy mill industry is behind this black curtain. So people don't see what goes on in these facilities because they're not transparent about it, because they know that if consumers really saw what was happening, they wouldn't be buying these dogs. So once the dogs get to the pet stores or you know, to the flea markets, then they're clean and look fine
Right.
on the outside.
Right.
but you don't know what kind of illnesses they have on the inside.
Right. Melanie, thank you so much for your time.
Glad
this was
to be
really
here.
informative, and I'm so glad that you were here to educate me about all this, and educate so that I can now educate my friends and other people, and we can put a stop to this thing that absolutely must be stopped.
Absolutely, that's how it's done.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.